G'day everyone, welcome to the Australian Herpetoculture podcast. How you going, Luke?
Good and yourself, mate?
Good, mate. Let's just get straight into it, eh?
Yeah, this week we've got a very exciting guest joining us. We are joined by the one and only Steve Wilson, who is a renowned Australian reptile author, photographer, traveller and fauna surveyor. Steve, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on here, and I've been looking forward to this one for a long time coming now.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on, folks. I'm glad we managed to work out a date that suits us all with your travels and mine.
Yeah, that's right. You were just in the field recently, weren't you?
I just got back on last Sunday from two weeks doing a bit of a 4,000k loop through central Queensland, looking at a group of little burrowing skinks called Laristas.
Oh, wicked.
And
Nice.
We've got a few new species on that trip, so that's good. So watch this space. I can't say anything else about it beyond that fact, but yeah,
Awesome.
it's interesting.
Looking forward to hearing
exciting
that.
though. Yeah. So Steve has worked with the likes of Jerry Swan to create some of the best field guides to date, including books such as A Complete Guide to Reptiles of Australia, What Snake Is That? And What Lizard Is That? Steve has also got countless papers that he's written and co-authored on various reptiles and other animal species. I have to say, like, as you know, maybe you had a chat with Jason before it, but I think we both own all of your books. So, you know, we're fanboying here. So
just signing a contract for a new one, which I'll be starting on in the next couple of days. Give myself a year to finish it. Just piecemeal bits here and there. 100 lizards, a global perspective. So that'll be the stuff I've done both in Australia and overseas with photography. So.
Nice. I look forward to that.
Now, got to find some sort of use for Komodo dragons and marine iguanas, don't I?
Yeah, well, that's just it, right? Like, you've done so much work with the Australian stuff, but you've done so much work with some exotic animals as well, too.
I had some pretty interesting times travelling, both in Australia and overseas, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Well, no doubt we're going to uncover a few stories as we get along the way. But why don't you just start us off as, basically a bit of a basic question so people can kind of get a bit of a gauge on yourself. But what kind of got you kick-started in an interest in animals?
I don't know what started it, but I've always wondered what is it that sparks that wire in a kid's brain. It may have been when I found a dead cicada on the ground when I grew up in Melbourne. I certainly remember that very vividly, and I kept it in a box, this dead cicada, until it moulded away. I remember finding tadpoles. I remember being given a frog. Just bear with me. Sorry about this. Someone gave me a frog, which I think is probably a Ewing's tree frog, looking back at it over the decades. But at the time, using the only book I had, which was the How and Why Wonder book of reptiles and amphibians, I identified it as a North American spring peeper, if it wasn't. But anyway, cicadas, frogs, bits and pieces, tadpoles, lizards down the local quarry, and it just fired the synapses in my brain. I've never really done anything else since I was tiny, so it's just been embedded within me all my life. So I don't know what triggered it or what the event was, and I don't know why some people have this drive in them. They just can't help it. You know, when I was a kid, we'd go out chasing skinks, and the other kids would come along too. So we'd all be doing it. We'd all be having fun. But they were sort of in it because of the thrill of that. And if I wasn't there, they'd go and do something else instead.
Yeah.
And as we parted, they drifted off and did other stuff, but I just kept on this passion.
It's a funny sort of trajectory, really, because usually you talk to a lot of people and they kind of have like that particular moment where something clicked in their head. But there is quite a few people like yourself where they can't give an answer.
I do remember when I was a kid, I would have been maybe 6 or 7, and one of my sisters or one of the kids down the road called out, "There's a blue tongue in the Henderson's garden." And not knowing what a blue tongue was, I sort of stuck my head over the fence, and here's this magnificent eastern blue tongue lying there. That stuck in my brain. So these various formulative things, I don't even know what order they were in, except I don't know, cicada was probably the first one because I was really young.
So what kind of took it from being just like that generalized interest as a kid and a bit of a memory like that? What kind of like was the real point where it kind of really fired off for you and it just kind of like escalated to that next level?
Well, once I started finding these things, I became a collector. I had to have stuff, and that stuff consisted of anything to do with natural history. I had to have it, and my very indulgent parents allowed me my own special room for this in the house, my specimen room. And in that room, I had skulls, I had reptiles in alcohol, I had some live reptiles, I had pinned insects, I had fossils, I just had everything to do with natural history. I gathered it around me. And then as I was sort of getting older, still doing all of this, I started focusing more and more on reptiles. I hasten to add, I'm not a good keeper. I don't think I've ever really been a good keeper. But I didn't know how to focus my attention. I just had to have reptiles around me. Yeah. And then the critical point, which really turned the direction of my passion and my focus, happened in my very early 20s. A bunch of us moved from Melbourne to Alice Springs. I'd been there a couple of times. I'd launched a couple of trips there when I was about 18 from Melbourne, including in a Volkswagen Beetle along all the rough roads up there, and hitchhiked up there and back, did all this stuff, fell in love with the arid zone and the agamids and the snakes and all that sort of stuff. And I gathered up my whole collection and all my goodies and waved tearful goodbye to my parents in the front door at Melbourne and drove my new ute up to Alice Springs. And we got with a fellow named Mike Gillum, who still lives there now. He wrote a lovely little piece on Sidonia many years ago. So we got out the back of this caravan park and we got an old hulk of a caravan and we bought all these aquariums in Alice Springs. We filled it up with reptiles. Then we got another old hulk of a caravan. We filled it up with reptiles. And then people started to arrive. Reptile people started to arrive in Alice Springs and set up around us. Richard Wells, Mike Gillum, Mike Swan, Peter Rankin, who tragically died very young several years later. Graham Gow called in. Paul Horner came and visited. All of these people, we basically had ourselves a little commune out the back of the caravan park. And we'd drive the roads for reptiles, we'd catch them, we'd sit around, we'd talk about them. And Peter Rankin taught me the difference between, it's a striped skink. Well, no, it's probably Tenotus alisa. And here's a key, and this is how you work your way through the key, stripes and spots and prefrontals and da-da-da. He taught me all of that. And a really tragic thing happened at that time. We had a -6 night, and basically all my collection died overnight. Because aquariums is no place to have a reptile, just sitting there without able to thermally buffer itself. And that was tragic, but it occurred at the same time that I was picking up a camera. And that was a critical point where I decided, look, it's no good me keeping reptiles. They're not doing any well, having me looking after them. But with a camera, I can collect all reptiles. I can collect blind snakes, laristas, tenotuses, pythons. I can collect all these images and start acquiring an image bank. So that was what started me on this quest to sort of photograph all the species I could. Keeping live reptiles is fantastic. I adore looking at other people's collections, but we all have different skills. And mine turned out to be, sort of finding them and photographing them and eventually writing about them.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique set of skills. There's a lot of people out there that are starting to get into the photography side of things, probably more so, it's a bit more mainstream nowadays. But yeah, to be able to key them out and do what you've done, that's the kind of stuff I think you and I both probably dream of, Jason, is being able to do a lot of this. But like, let's kind of have a look at it this way too, because, like, we're not going to lie, there's a few years between you and us,
Yeah.
and back then that probably wouldn't have been like a very normal thing to do, whereas it seems
no.
pretty normal these days for us to
Yeah,
have
that's
wizards
right.
and stuff.
Wasn't normal. No, strange. It was really strange. But in those Alice Springs days, there was enough of us in town that the barman and yardman in the Alice Springs pub was a reptile guy. The janitor at the Alice Springs High School was a reptile guy. The guy fettling on the railways was a reptile guy. The cleaner at the high school was a reptile guy. They're all these friends of mine that just sort of came in. So amongst ourselves, it was quite mainstream. But
Yeah,
it's strange. Oh yeah, it wasn't normal. No. And to this day, I mean, a lot of people think it's pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more literature around now. So, you know, there's magazines, there's huge amount of stuff on the social media and stuff.
Yeah, that's
a lot more
right.
exposure to reptiles. When I was growing up, I had Worrell's Reptiles of Australia, and I had Cogger's Reptiles in Colour. You know, the little, yeah, and they
The
were
little
sort
ones,
of my
yeah.
guru books. And Cogger's first big volume of Reptiles and Amphibians, first edition, came out while we were in that caravan park in Alice Springs, and we all ogled over it, and there's things that I've never heard of.
Yeah, it would have been like a Bible almost.
Yeah, it was. It was. Then I shifted to Perth, following reptiles. I thought, well, there's all sorts of stuff I've never seen in WA, and started photographing all that stuff there. And it was when I was in Perth, it sort of dawned on me that, well, I've got these pictures now. Maybe I can do something with some of those. So I, off the pat, wrote a article on geckos and submitted it to a magazine called Geo, which doesn't exist anymore. Not Australian Geographic, it's a Geo magazine. And surprisingly, they bought it and wrote me a nice letter, because everything's done by letter, no computers or typewriters.
Yeah.
In fact, I used to hand write my stuff and give it to somebody who could type it.
Wow.
And they wrote back and said, yeah, you know, $750. Thanks for your story, and we'll, you know, half payment now and half. And that was in the mid 70s. So $750 then would have been like, you know, here's $3,500 or something for your story, which was sure inspired me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What was it like back then, photographing? Because obviously this day and age everyone shoots digital, so
Well,
you know
of course,
you
it was
can
all
spray
film.
and pray. So you would have had to.
It was all film, so you don't. Every time you press the button, money.
Yeah, exactly.
Click dollar. My first camera was a Pentax Spotmatic F. I wouldn't even recognise one if I saw one now. But for most of my film photography, I was using the Olympus OM2N series, which were really good.
Yeah.
They had great lenses and, you know, telescopic extension rings to get in close, ring flashes and various bits and pieces. I sort of got dragged kicking and screaming into the digital world, you know, like an old fuddy-duddy, and I didn't want to, but, you know, that's what happens, you know, sink or swim.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it would have been pretty hard back then because you would have had to look after all the film and make sure it didn't get damaged when you were changing out in the field. And
I did trips overseas where I'd take 60 rolls of film.
Wow.
And that big box of film, you know, you don't want it heat affected, you don't want it X-ray, you want it X-rayed as few times as possible, travelling through international borders. You don't want to lose it. Kodachrome 64 ASA was my film of choice, and once you'd got home, when you bought your film, it came in a little paper or plastic cylinder with the film roll in it, in a yellow envelope, and you would write the address of Kodak on the envelope and just whack your film in the mail. Off it'd go. About 2 weeks later, you get a nice little yellow box in the mail from Kodak with all your slides in it.
Wow.
And then you'd sort them all out, and, oh, God, you know, there's an underexposure, you know. So when I was on a big trip, and you've done a lot of rolls of film, I'd always try and look at the last one first when I got them all back. If I got them all back as a batch, I want to find the last one first. Because if the last one's okay, it means there's been no malfunction going through all of the rest of the stuff, you know.
Yeah.
If the last one's a complete dead loss, oh my God, you go to the second load, you know, see if something went wrong somewhere. Mercifully, that never happened to me, but that was my principle, always looking at the last one first. I've still got all of those transparencies.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I still use them. I store them in the Queensland Museum because it's air-conditioned and humid-controlled in the back of the vertebrate zoology collection. I've got a little shelf there, or it's a fairly big shelf, actually. There's a lot of slides and wooden boxes all labelled. And, if I need them, they're there. I've got my scanner sitting right beside me, and it works out pretty well. I don't know whether you're familiar with the second edition of my Queensland Field Guide with the Carlia rhomboidalis, the red and blue throat on the front cover. Well, that's scanned off a slide from my scanner.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. There you go. I'll have to have a look at that one after this, yeah.
You've probably got a few on the shelf, Chase.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't reach my bookshelf now. I've just shuffled the room around. So.
I like reptile books. This is some of them behind me here.
Yeah.
And there's another whole batch over to my right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely my other addiction. These reptile books.
Oh, yeah. Good. Bye.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said that when you were traveling around, when you initially started, you went out in the Volkswagen and you got your new ute. Did you kind of come across a few other modes of transportation, in particular to get to some of these really remote areas that you went to?
Hitchhiking.
Yeah.
I did a lot of hitchhiking. Hitchhiked from Perth to Cairns and back, Melbourne to Darwin and back. A lot of hitchhiking.
How did some of those stories go down when you told people what you were doing in the area?
Well, sometimes we'd get in a car. I remember when I was a kid, we'd hitchhike out from where I lived with my parents out to the western basalt plains in Melbourne and hitchhike back with bags of tiger snakes. Now, people had picked us up, never knew what was in the bags.
Yeah.
There's probably a wise move not to tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So as far as like transport, that's one thing. But what sort of crucial items did you used to take out with you? And did you bring anything with you that most herpers would probably consider a little bit unusual?
Oh, that's a tough one. I do carry. Most people, if you're a reptile photographer, you'd probably think it was a good thing to carry. But the little plastic pot plant lids, bases.
Yep.
I carry several of those when I'm travelling still, and I did then. Two with a little mouse hole cut out of one little rim, because they're ideal to get a little snake to curl up under it for photography.
Yeah.
So I'd have a whole bunch of those of different sizes. Other than that, I think I just carry the normal sort of camping gear and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
It's a question I like to throw in there because every now and then somebody gives you something that you just never considered normal.
What sort of things have you heard of?
Oh, like for instance, like when was it Nipper that we had on? He mentioned that he used to keep baby wipes in his backpack.
Oh,
it's like, I wasn't sure if it was for him, but he did use them for himself as well. But at the same time, he was saying it's always good to, remove feces off a snake or something like that in case flies keep sticking to a snake. So
yeah, that's a good idea. I'll put that in my next kit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. I never considered it. And then when I was in Darwin recently, I used a hell of a lot of them.
Okay.
So,
right. Oh, okay.
Not a bad thing to have.
Oh, I'll bear that in mind.
So what was kind of like the point where you decided to start making field guides? Like, did you get approached by somebody or did you just start doing it yourself to put everything together?
The story was after I'd done a couple of these magazine articles for Geo. I did the gecko one, I did one on goannas, I did one on snakes, I did one on cicadas because I've always had a great love for cicadas. And while I was doing these, living in Perth, my friend Dave Knowles and Started doing some really interesting overseas trips. We got ourselves into the interior of Borneo, into Kalimantan and Sulawesi and Sumatra and Java and Peninsula Malaysia and that sort of stuff. And we got a lot of, pretty interesting stuff, a lot of amazing reptiles and frogs and insects and rainforest pictures and da-da-da-da-da. And we decided that we would do a book on tropical rainforests of Southeast Asia and the things that live in them. So we spent ages cobbling some text together and pictures. In retrospect, it was absolute crap. It really was. The pictures were okay. The places we went were magnificent, but we really didn't have any direction for it. There was no narrative in it. It was just, let's put all these things in there and fill it up with captions. But anyway, we went to Sydney and we took the book draft. We got an appointment with William Collins Publishers, and they sort of looked at it and, kindly said to us, well, not really. But we were chatting in the office, and one of us just blurted out, what about, there doesn't exist in Australia a book with a photograph of everything? Oh, well, they said, if you could do that, we'd certainly be interested. So we scampered back to our little unit in Glebe in Sydney and sort of thought, well, between you and me and the various other people, our network, we had just about everything that was named at that time.
Yeah.
This was in 1982, this conversation took place. So we cobbled together a bit of a idea and took it to them, and they bought it and sent us a $2,000 advance, half of which was spent on part of which was spent on an electric typewriter. And then we thought, well, where should we sit down and write this? And the biggest gap that we had in our photography, we had WA pretty well covered for the time.
Yeah.
And was Queensland. So we both shifted to Brisbane. And we wrote the Australia's Reptiles, the Wilson and Knowles. You know the book?
Yeah.
Vaguely.
Right.
That's what I need. I need doors on my... Yep, I have seen that one.
So that came out in 88. But that was the first sitting down and writing a species by species, maps, photographs, and that sort of stuff. And that was because we took this idea to William Collins publishers that they didn't want, but had a conversation and turned up to something they did want.
And imagine if that moment never happened. Like, that would have been a complete game changer. Maybe you would have been in a completely different trajectory in life.
Well, I'd still be thinking the way I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wouldn't change my, passion, but I don't know what, I may not have found a direction for it. I think I would have, because I was already, I was amassing the images. Something had done with those pictures somewhere.
Yeah.
May not have been field guys, though.
So, I mean, as you kind of alluded to there, things obviously chop and change, year to year as far as taxonomy and things goes in the reptile world. So how do you kind of keep up with it all and all the species changes and new species being discovered?
Well, I guess there's a network of people involved in taxonomy. If someone publishes something, we know about it. You hear about it, you get it. You get the paper emailed to you in a PDF form by someone,
Yeah.
You know about it. You do.
Yeah, like somebody's always got you in mind for it.
Yes. If something was published next week, I'd know about it by the following week if it was a new Australian description.
And then does that get your gears rolling to then go out and try and find it? Or
Absolutely. I managed to find one of those things a month ago that was recent, was named in late 2021.
Yep.
There was a paper came out, the Skinks anomalopus, the long-limbed, long-bodied, short-limbed Well, there's a paper that splits some of those up, and there's a group of them that are very worm-like with no legs at all.
Yeah.
Got hived off into a different genus with 2 new, quite distinctive-looking species named in that paper, and one of them's from a place called Lake Elphinstone in central Queensland. So I was on a trip up there. So with my wife, we went to Lake Elphinstone, and I hoofed up the sandstone slope with a little hand rake and raked out this strange worm-like lizard. This was just in February.
Yeah.
And got my first pictures of it. So, if something's named like that, I want to
try and find
photos of it. Yeah, for sure. But I'm always happy using other people's pictures too. But if I've got my own, I don't have to look for them. I just
exactly.
I need a picture now or for next week or next year. Go to the files, pull it out.
How does your wife find you doing all this stuff? Is she happy with you going off and doing your thing?
Yeah. If it's a nice place, if it's aesthetically pleasant and comfortable, she likes coming too. She's prepared to put up with long drives and things. But if it's somewhere where its only redeeming feature is the animals and the rest of it is hot and dusty and abundant flies and mosquitoes and no one who wasn't passionate would be even enjoying themselves there, then fair cop, she doesn't want to go there. I did
that's fair
a couple of years ago with some friends to Ether Booker on the eastern edge of the Simpson Desert, just on the Queensland side where the dunes start before they roll right through the interior, eastern limit for thorny devils and Gillen's monitors and all that sort of stuff. And it was horrifically humid. There was the clay pans had water in them and just humidity coming off them, and the flies are in your eyes in the daytime, and the mosquitoes are whining around your head at night. Now, seriously, no one, unless they really, really had a reason to sit through all of that, would go there at that time of year.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't inflict that on anyone.
Yeah, it can be pretty brutal.
Yeah, especially the humidity and the mosquitoes. I think the mosquitoes do a number on me, I reckon.
Yeah.
Got a few trips lined up that I'll have to deal with them, I reckon.
Where are you off to?
Me and Luke have been chatting about trying to get, like we spoke earlier, about the leaf tails.
The leaf-tailed geckos,
Yeah. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. There was an interesting discovery of one right near here a couple of years ago. The southern leaf-tailed gecko, Saltura swaini, turned up at Mount Glorious, which is just on the edge of Brisbane here, where herpetologists have been visiting that mountain for decades. It's one of the most looked at rainforests in Australia.
Yeah.
Things had never been found there until about 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow,
Tiny
that's
little pocket of them.
Yeah. There you go.
So, there's things to find.
Yeah. Just go out there and find them.
Jason was a bit unfortunate that he couldn't come on the last trip, and it was kind of his trip for his animals he wanted to find, and I went along and managed to clean up with them. Yeah.
Well, the thing about this one at Mount Glorious, there was a possibility that it could have gone several different ways.
Yeah.
Because leaf tails really do speciate out very readily. If there's an isolated population, as in central Queensland with the Philurises, you get a mountain here, it's got Isis, this one's got Champion A, this one's got Nephthys or something like that. And in southeast Queensland, Mount Glorious is not connected to any other rainforest. So the big question was, is this leaf tail an isolated species that's just turned up or not? So none were collected, but we did get some tail tips for genetics.
Yeah.
We got up there at night and caught a couple and got some tail tip material, let the geckos go. And we found that they are swaying. Well, here's the three possible scenarios. Brand new species tucked away. Established population, because a lot of people in Brisbane, people go up and let things go and do all sorts of things, Was that possible? Or was it just a range extension of existing swaini?
Yeah.
It turned out to be the latter.
Yeah.
But the genetics of it were different enough, not that it's a different species, but it's identifiable as a subpopulation of swaini, so they weren't let go there from somewhere else.
Yeah, okay.
They're not identical to the Lamington ones or the Main Range ones or the Mount Tambourine ones.
Yeah.
They were just that little bit different, as all those other ones are from each other as well. So it fits in Swain Eye. It's a local population that has been there a long time.
That's pretty interesting,
that was interesting.
Yeah. Oh man. There's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
I just need to get out and see some more stuff.
Sure.
So it's something else that you've also done, apart from just your field guides and your paperwork, but you also created a children's book that was, obviously a reptile book.
Yeah, it's a reptile book for kids, yeah.
Yeah. What kind of made that come about?
Well, kids need a stimulating interest. I had the How and Why Wonder book for reptiles when I was a kid, and I used to ogle over it and look at all these things, and I look at it now and there's a lot of nonsense in it, but it stimulated my interest.
Yeah.
And so I think that's pretty important that kids have something written for them. It's not scientific, it's not complicated, but what I did was I just divided Australia into some of the major habitats, and each double-page spread had a background picture of a habitat, be it alpine or desert or rainforest or tropical woodland or something like that, and little boxes of the different species that live in those places, a little bit of a blurb about what sort of places they are, just a little bit of a potted coverage of what lives in Australia for kids. Get them to badger their parents to take them there.
Yeah, well, you could be inspiring the next lot of
That's right.
herpers. So, those kids often get forgotten about when it comes to books like that. You see a lot of the kids' books that get printed and, it says carpet python, but there's a picture of a boa on there or something like that.
I know. It really gets me, yeah. Oh, no, I had to make it nice and, accurate and readable. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's long out of print now, which is a shame, but anyway, still out there if kids want to hunt it down somehow.
Oh, it's not just kids. I'm sure I need to hunt that one down too. So.
Well, I did have a spare copy that I sold the other day to a seasoned old herpetologist who wanted it. Collection.
Yeah, there you go. Surely I'll be able to twist somebody's arm, put another book on the shelf.
Yeah, sure.
So, obviously, another one of your major roles is you're a fauna surveyor in southeast Queensland.
Mm-hmm.
What's actually involved in that role? Because a lot of our listeners probably aren't too aware of that.
Well, sometimes when there's a proposed development, whether it's a mine or a road widening or something, there is a mandatory process that has to be gone through before it proceeds, or that involves, vegetation people looking at it, reptile, fauna people looking at it, seeing what's there, and that's one of the things I do. Doesn't mean I'm in favour of the project, because generally I'm not, but it's a mandatory process, so you may as well have someone there who knows what they're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's there's been quite a lot of people down my way kind of jumping up and down in arms and stuff about some new housing developments and things that are being built in Ingleside and stuff where, all these species are kind of, they've only got their little isolated pockets in places like this, like such as things like the red-crowned toadlets and that. And,
God, that really gets me.
Yeah. And yet they're widening roads so they can get more cars down before they get the houses in.
We're not capable of doing the necessary compromises,
That's right. Yeah.
A subdivision goes in and everything goes. Every tree, every bush, every animal, every plant is just wiped off the face of the earth. And then houses are packed in so close that none of that stuff will ever be able to recolonise it again.
Yeah, exactly.
These subdivisions on the edge of Brisbane, there's no room for a blue tongue to live in someone's garden there because there's just wall-to-wall houses. I find that really offensive, To be a realist, people need to live somewhere and they're going to come what may, so you may as well do it in a sustainable, environmentally responsible way. Bands of bushland with bands of housing or corridors or something, some connectivity to other habitat. So things can move through where you're living rather than just being wiped off the face of the earth.
Yeah, I think that's the same everywhere, though. Even where I am, I'm a little bit further north, and all the new housing developments are the exact same. Every single tree's cleared. Any water source is completely cleared. They don't any infrastructure for any of the native wildlife whatsoever, which is, that's one reason why I didn't want to buy in one of those areas because, there's not even as many birds flying around in those areas, I've noticed as well, because I've got a few mates that live in there. So
the pattern I see in Brisbane, it may apply to you, but it certainly applies here, is that there's a higher diversity and abundance of wildlife, including reptiles, in the inner areas because they're established. Old Queenslanders, creeks running through the suburbs, not always native trees, some of they're figs or jacarandas or whatever, but there's trees along the creek, there's water dragons all the way along. In the outer suburbs, they're being blitzed, so you got this like a donut with this dead area around the edges where the suburbs are going, and the bulldozers are knocking everything down.
Yeah.
And this inner area that's well established, Brisbane has a topography that does protect some areas. There's steep gullies that just, don't like to build on.
Yeah.
And these have this sort of level of diversity in them that's really quite remarkable. Within 5 kilometres of where I work in the Queensland Museum, which is in the CBD, there's probably 30 odd species of reptiles.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to. I haven't actually noticed that, but to be honest, I haven't really taken notice of it. But
Roma Street Parklands, right in the CBD, you'll see carpet snakes there. You'll see, gazillion water dragons, water skinks, a couple of species of turtles.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for that. I think. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I can see it being the same here too on the outer skirts of Sydney compared to some of the inner suburbs of Sydney.
Yeah. Perth's in an unfortunate situation because the bulk of Perth is on a extraordinarily biologically diverse sand plain, and sand plains don't have any obstacles to development on them. You just out they go.
Yeah.
So Sydney has your Sydney sandstones. There's gullies and stuff in Sydney that just because of the fact that they exist as gullies, no one can build on them. You've got those in Sydney.
Yeah.
You've got that in Brisbane. Perth doesn't have that obstacle to obscene development, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
That's unfortunate.
We make ourselves too sad, will we?
So while we are still talking about the fauna surveying role that you do have, you've actually implemented some really efficient monitoring systems on pipeline construction sites.
That's been incredibly interesting stuff. If you're doing fauna work, one of the techniques is a pit trap. I'm not sure whether you or your listeners know what a pit trap is, but in case you don't, a simple pit trap is you dig a row of holes with buckets sunk to ground level, and you run a little drift fence, a of fly-wire mesh right across the top of the buckets, and things wander along, hit the fence and nose their way along and fall in the buckets, and you go out, multiple times a day and you pull out all sorts of stuff you wouldn't normally find so easily. Well, the gas pipeline trenches I worked on are giant pit traps, and an awful lot of stuff falls in. The longest one I worked on went for 940 clicks.
Wow.
From just east of Roma in Queensland through to the desert in Moomba in South Australia. And there's just so much stuff falls in. So the question is, how do you monitor it? Now, obviously, it's not 940 Ks all at once. That's just ridiculous. So what they're doing, they're digging a pipeline trench, and then some kilometres behind that, they're burying pipe in and filling it in. So once it's filled in, it's not an issue. It's that gap in between the excavation and the filling in, which can stretch out to 30 or 40 Ks.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a continuous 30 or 40 Ks because they've got to ramp it up every K or so and ramp it down so stuff like kangaroos, cattle, snakes and lizards can get out. But stuff does go in there and stay there. So what I worked out, when they make these pipelines, when they constructed a pipeline. They've got multiple hessian bags full of sawdust that they set the pipes on before they weld them together and drop them in the trench. So I was getting hundreds of these sawdust-filled hessian bags and dropping them in the trench every 100 metres, propped up against the wall of the trench. And in very hot weather, I'd wet them. And they were visual distance apart along the 30 Ks. So with a metal hook from the top and a long-handled hoop bag and a long-handled snake hook and a stick stuck on the side of the trench beside each bag so I'd know where it was. And I'd, in my car, drive to that bag, look over the edge of the trench, look both ways to see if I could see anything, lift the bag back, and there'd be lots of snakes and lizards under there. And marsupials and native rodents and all sorts of stuff like that. And then get them out, record the numbers and what they were and the GPS data, let them go, move on to the next bag and do that. And I'd do that the whole way along throughout the day. And then towards the end of the day, I'd be getting to where they dug new trench that day. So I'd drop bags in at the end of the day where they've been working. And the last of these jobs I worked on was on the Barclay from Tennant Creek to about 250 Ks to the east of Tennant Creek. And one day we got 600 and something vertebrates out of the trench.
Bloody hell.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of geckos, a lot of the various burrow plug geckos, knobtail geckos, wormers, big mulgus snakes and western browns and ringed browns and blind snakes and shovel-nosed snakes and loads of agamids.
While you're talking about that stretch there, do you find that the Ciliaris there are a bit different to the stuff that are up north?
The Ciliaris, that was the most numerous animal we got on that job.
Yeah. Doesn't surprise me.
We got over 3,000 Ciliaris.
Wow.
It's probably a bigger number than I thought.
Any more Ciliaris. They were just everywhere. And I've often written in my books, sometimes when you're writing something in books, you're often narrating from previous references of someone else, and sometimes things can get perpetuated and you're not really sure how true they are, but you keep writing it because everyone else in previous books has done it, and you're quoting a text. The squirting of goo a metre, well, they do.
Yeah.
They can do it. I saw it. So that's, yeah. But I, as far as how different they are, well, there was a paper written many, many years ago by Arnold Kluge where he split Ciliaris into about 5 or 6 different quite identifiable populations. One of those is now Strophaurus chrysalis from central Queensland, inland Queensland. One of them is Strophaurus ciliaris aberrans from northwestern Australia, Ciliaris ciliaris. So, yeah, they are. You do see differences across the place.
Yeah,
I didn't see those as being strikingly different.
Okay. That's good to know. I was just speaking to a few people, and after they saw a few of my photos and stuff like that, they were convinced that it was something a bit different. But, everyone likes to speculate anyway.
They need a bit more work. There could be a few more things tucked away in Ciliaris.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, definitely a big population, especially if there's 3,000 of those in that one job,
Yeah, they were everywhere. They were everywhere.
Yeah, I was impressed with finding like half a dozen. But,
Yeah, so that's what I did with the pipelines, and that became sort of well adopted by others.
Well, it seems like it obviously works, if you're giving...
Yeah.
With, relative, I wouldn't say relative ease because it's very hard. You're travelling, doing a lot of driving and often in very hot weather, and but you are able to monitor extended stretches of this stuff.
Yeah.
And get, most things out.
Yeah, well, it's good results.
Yeah.
So.
So, back on the kind of topic of, herping stories, obviously spending so much time out there in the field and in the bush and stuff, you've surely got a few kind of scary moments up your sleeves
I've had some
where,
scary moments, yeah. Let me see. I went into a little park in Tananarive in Madagascar, and the kids in the park were killing chameleons for fun, whacking them with sticks. And I saw a mating pair of chameleons that these kids were about to whack. So I sort of got in amongst them and sort of, joke, joke, joke. They didn't speak English. I didn't speak Malgache. But I sort of, with a big grin on my face, sort of took these two chameleons and found a really big prickly bush they couldn't get at, sort of dropped them in there and rattled it so they all fell down. And then I realised that these kids had started to surround me. They all had rocks. These were really pretty hardened sort of street kids. And I'd walked in the middle of them and I sort of thought, what the heck have you done now, Steve? Grinning and and sort of back out and managed to get myself out. But that was a bit tricky. Sometimes you sort of act without thinking of the consequences.
Yep.
Another time with a mate of mine, we were on the Mexico-Arizona border spotlighting at night. And there's all these signs. It was in one of the national parks, Organ Pipes National Park, I think it was called, right on the border. And there were signs, report suspicious movements, don't approach any strangers, da, da, da. Anyway, so we're in the middle of this sort of cactus desert along this little arroyo, it's what they call little dry creek beds there. We found a couple of nice diamondback rattlesnakes there. It was lovely. Spotlighted them, curled up. And then we heard Spanish being spoken very close to us. Now, 100% they would have been migrants coming across the border from Mexico. More than likely they would have been just people trying to get a better life in the US. But they are often led by people that really are pretty heavy people.
Yeah.
They're guides. And it'd be very likely that they would have one of these guides ushering them through the border. And here we were out in the middle of nowhere. And 100%, if they'd have heard us, they would have thought we were there to catch them. Why else would we be out there in the desert at night with
spotlights and
sneaking around the bush?
Yeah.
We sort of, this could be awkward. And sort of turned off our torches and sort of tiptoed back along towards the car and shot through. But that was a worrying moment as well.
Yeah, that would have been for sure, that one.
Yeah.
It's pretty hairy, that area sometimes.
It was a very good trip. We saw an awful lot of amazing reptiles in 3 weeks in Arizona, I tell you. It was brilliant.
What were some of your highlights from that trip?
Stalking a lizard called a Scaloporus. They're these lovely, about the size of a Jackie dragon, bright blue and purple on them, and this sort of fence lizards, they call them. I was stalking one of those and I heard and looked down, as a beautiful banded rock rattlesnake curled up at my feet. That was lovely. And perhaps the high point was I was there with a good friend since our teenage years, Mike Swan. You're probably very aware of his work and his books and stuff too.
Yeah.
And we were really keen to find a horned lizard. And we had a bet going, or whoever finds one, the other guy has to buy him a meal. And I was walking across this stony flat and this beautiful little round-tailed horned lizard, little pebble mimic, just sort of shuffled and moved. So I just called out, "Nachos!" He knew exactly what I meant.
It's always good to have a bit of banter.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's great fun.
So I suppose on the flip side of that, though, you must have some pretty fond memories of some of the places that you've visited over the years as well.
Absolutely. I've still got a great fondness for Alice Springs and wet tropics, Girrawheen National Park on the New England tableland where it pokes into southern Queensland. Reptiles everywhere there. It's just fantastic. Lots of leaf-tailed geckos, lots of dragons, lots of reptiles there, and beautiful scenery. You go there in spring, it's a blaze of colour as well, The sand plains of Perth, what's left of them, are just fantastic. when I lived over there, it was we were looking for jewel beetles, photographing orchids, photographing reptiles. Just a brilliant place. Overseas, I spent 3 months in Madagascar, and I've just got so many fond memories of there. It's tragic with the destruction that's been going on over there, but you get into areas that are intact, and you're just walking into this strange new world of different characters. You know, it's just gorgeous little tiny leaf chameleons and weird snakes everywhere. And, the Namib Desert, I fell in love with the Namib Desert in Namibia. Extremely harsh, only place I've ever been where you could look all around and not see a stick of vegetation.
Wow.
Just mobile dunes. And yet, you know, there was a Perengues viper buried up to its eyeballs in the shade of what had been a fence that the sand had moved over and buried. Weird little lizards. I don't know whether you saw them in David Attenborough's docos, these little lacertids that do this sort of footwork. With
yes.
Yeah, well, they were running around on the dune tops and stuff. So that was lovely. Look, there's just so many wonderful places. So many. Tasmania, lovely places in Tassie. Not as diverse as other places, but in some of them you just got huge numbers of reptiles. Skinks everywhere.
Yeah.
Same in the Victorian Alps. Up around Mount Falls Creek. I've been around there, and the skinks are virtually sort of parting before you on a really nice, cool but sunny morning, you know. 12 degrees but sunny and no wind, and the sunny side of the tussocks is all these lovely little skinks. You know? Doesn't have to be big showy things all the time.
Yeah.
No.
I'm happy watching a gecko on a wall.
Yeah. There's this trip that we did up to where did we go? We went Washpool National Park and Dorrigo and stuff. We were going to take an extra night and try to push up to Girraween, but the road was closed to get up there, so we didn't quite make it there. But that was the first time that I'd ever been to some of that granite country, and that's so impressive.
Lovely Cunningham skinks that live there. The New England Cunningham skinks, beautiful.
Yeah. I was seeing some of these big boulders and, you know.
Magnificent. That's why I love it so much, because you got reptile diversity against a scenically grand backdrop as well.
Yeah. It's beautiful stuff. I think I know my wife's trying to push to go towards WA next time. She wants to go see Karajini National Park.
Oh, so. That's lovely. Yeah, I've been in there. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there one species that has eluded you every time you've gone out to look for it?
I've only properly looked for it a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it's eluded me, and it's my bugbear. There's a couple, actually.
Yeah.
One is the little Cryptogamma aurita, a little pebble mimic dragon from the Kimberleys. And I went out to the type locality with some friends and colleagues of mine, which is near Halls Creek. And we had an idea of how to look for them. It didn't work, but I still think it's a good idea. And that was two people walking about sort of 3 metres apart with a loose rope with a couple of plastic milk bottles tied to it.
Yeah.
Dragging on a third person who's walking behind looking, because if these things move, you're in with a chance.
Yeah. Anyway,
it didn't work, but, you know, I'd really like to find one of those. The other one is a legless lizard in Perth called Plethylax. Hyper thin, very strongly keeled, pygopodid with a yellow throat and a sharp nose, and it's like a live piece of wire.
Wow.
I never did find one in the 6 years I lived in Perth, and every time I've gone back, I've gone out looking for them, but they're pretty hard things to look for. Presumably very common from those that do fauna survey stuff with pit traps. They get them fairly often.
Yep.
Got to be lucky.
It's just like some of those things, right? You just got to be in the right place at the right time.
Yep. Another one that I really wanted to find, and I did find by good fortune, is the Gascoyne pebble mimic Aeolus dragon, which lives only in the Gascoyne region of WA. Tympanocryptus gigas. Aeolus dragons are famous for, some of them are famous for their camouflage, because they're little pebble mimics on the stony plains and things like that. And this one lives on quartz plains, so it's white.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. And
That'd be stunning, yeah.
it is something. It is something. And I was there with a friend of mine a couple of years ago. We'd been up to Yinithara to photograph the Yinithara rock dragon, which is only found on one area. And this thing's found peripheral to that on the quartz gibber. And every now and then we're driving across this just sea of blinding white quartz. I say, stop the car, I can't stand, I've got to look for these things. I get out and start randomly turning stones, getting open. And then one hot afternoon I said, we should maybe have a look under the shade of the acacias. So we just sort of walked and stood under a couple of acacias and shuffled around, and bingo, this little white dragon. Beautiful.
Wow.
That'd be the high point of the last decade for me, I think, finding
Yeah.
thing.
It's almost like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. Just because it moved. If it hadn't moved, not a chance. I wouldn't have found the round-tailed horned lizard if it hadn't moved either.
Makes you wonder how many times you've walked over them.
Oh, absolutely.
And they haven't moved.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that goes with a lot of reptiles, though, right? You know,
That's
I've
right.
always wondered what I've walked past.
Yep,
Yeah.
definitely.
What's under the stone you didn't turn?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, especially a lot of those little dragons, they can just match their environment so easily, especially when they're warm. You know, they have that ability to change colours very quickly.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, another fond place I have, of course, is the Mitchell Plateau and the Kimberleys. With a clear water flowing across sandstone pavement and superb dragons, bright green in the overhanging vegetation. You know, it's lovely.
Yeah, that's one place I want to get to.
I never did find a rough-scaled python there either. It's another thing I'd like to find in the wild.
So haven't quite ticked off all the pythons that.
No. Shot. I haven't seen the rough-scaled or the Owen Pelly.
I got to see one of those a few weeks ago.
Oh, nice! A few weeks ago. Nice.
Yeah, that same trip that I was on. We managed to get incredibly lucky. I can't say how incredibly lucky we were, but yeah, we got to see a 9-foot individual within about 2 minutes of looking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so probably made a lot of people very jealous with that, unfortunately. But you know, right place, right time.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh. Mind you, I'd have more chance if I went to Kakadu, wouldn't I?
It does help.
It does. But I'll have to go there and have another look for it. I mean, I have been there and looked for it. I'm not saying, gee, I wish I could find something I haven't even looked for.
Yeah.
It doesn't count.
No, I'd love to go to the Mitchell Plateau as well. There's so many species up there that are just
gorgeous.
Incredible.
Yep. Harsh, long way, corrugated roads, it's an effort.
Yeah, but worth it.
Sometimes, going through the effort really heightens the feeling of reward. You get no reward for your own pelly python, no effort. You just get out of your car and there it is. Imagine if you'd been there for 4 days. No,
yeah, it's well deserved. Yeah, I'm happy to have a stab thrown at me like that. By all means, you're not the first to give it to me. So, yeah. No, I was on that trip though. I was incredibly. My biggest thing is I love Gillen's monitors. I've got about a dozen or so here at the moment. And I went down to like Yulara and down that region looking for them last year and struck out very hard. But I was lucky that I was with a fellow that knew a spot in a particular area and got to see one of those guys in the wild. So sweating my bum off on a couple of trips to try to find them was awesome. When you did finally get to see them.
Lovely. They really are lovely, yeah.
Yeah.
Last time I looked for those was on the Ether Booker trip because I did want to get photograph one from within Queensland.
Yep.
Which is Ether Booker's just their eastern limit. But I was reluctant to sort of rip bark off dead mulga because dead mulga doesn't put bark back.
Exactly.
So I took hammer and nails with me. And any bark I lifted back, I'd whack it back again so it's still there as habitat.
Yeah. Well, that's a great tip for anybody that is potentially going to do that because that was one thing that kind of destroyed me a little bit seeing in the region that I first looked down at Yulara is a lot of those.
Ripped them all off.
I hadn't personally, but as pretty much as far as a human could reach up these trees was completely bare.
Yeah, people looking for things. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So,
bark is something that's really difficult to investigate. I'm so careful looking under bark these days because it doesn't grow back, you know.
Yeah.
A dead tree, once it's lost its bark, it's, you know. So, yeah, the hammer and nails, just a little, you know, just little nails, and you pull the bark back and then tap it back into place.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Good tip, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, mate. This has been an absolute awesome
Yeah.
chat. Jace, do you have anything else that you want to throw Steve's way?
Not really, no.
Well,
No.
keep up the good work, fellas. This has been fun.
No, it's great to chat. So.
Pleasure. Great pleasure. Always.
We
I
definitely
like to share my keenness. I like to speak to other keen people as well.
Oh, it's. I think that's the important thing, right? Is, you know, we're all in it for the same reasons, essentially. You know,
That's
we love
right.
these animals and we love the habitats they come from. So to be able to talk with like-minded people is awesome.
Yep, and time flies too when you're having fun.
Yeah. That's it.
Okay, then, fellas. Thanks for inviting me on. It's been a great pleasure to chat to you, and I hope your listeners have had a bit of fun listening to this.
Oh, no doubt. You know, with your next books, if you ever want to come on and give them a bit of a plug or anything like that,
Well,
you're more than welcome.
now.
Go for it.
In May, my third edition of the Field Guide to Reptiles of Queensland will be out.
Awesome.
So
we have pre-orders available for that, or?
Yeah, you can just contact me via Facebook, and I'll send you my email details and that sort of stuff, and anybody can get in touch and order copies.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Excellent.
I can't give you a price yet because I'm not sure what the price will be. That's determined by the publishers.
Yep. Oh, if you're a book collector, the price doesn't matter.
I signed off on it a month and a half ago, and they reckon it'll be out by mid to late May, which I think could be a whisker optimistic, but it shouldn't be too long after that.
Yep.
It's still pretty close, really, in the scheme of things.
It's a April now, so.
Awesome.
Right.
All right, Steve. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We've really appreciated this.
Good on you.
We'll sign off now.
Okay. Signing off. See you later. Thanks a lot.
See you, Steve. Bye-bye. Alrighty, guys. So we'd like to say a massive thank you to Eric and Owen and the rest of the NPR crew for having us. If you'd like to contact them, it's best to find them at moreliapythonradio.com and email them at info@moreliapythonradio.com. Make sure to follow the NPR network on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. As far as contacting us on our social media platforms, you can email us at australianherpetoculture@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Make sure to check out our Teespring store for podcast merch. The link is on the Facebook page. To see more of what Jason is doing, make sure to follow him on Facebook and Instagram at The Gecko Effect. For myself, you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, and Teespring under Beach's Scaly Beasts. I hope to have you back next week for another episode of the Australian Herpetoculture Podcast. Good night, everyone.